Hello viewers, today we will discuss the play The Post Office by Rabindranath Tagore. Amal, an orphan child of about 10 from a village in India, has been taken in by a childless but loving couple who lives in the city. Now, however, Amal is gravely ill and the traditional local healer insists that he stay indoors. Confined to his room, he sits by the open window where he engages with a variety of passerbys. All are taken aback by his simple but tireless quest for knowledge, his unflinching love for life and his need to discover the world around him and beyond him. Across the street, Amal sees a shiny new building with a bright yellow flag waving from the roof. It is the King's Post Office. Though he can't even read, he is fascinated by the notion of letters flying through time and space. As Amal's physical strength diminishes, his spiritual strength expands. The play's universal appeal has made it a world classic. The English translation of this play was done by the celebrated poet W.B. Yeats. Gandhiji was spellbound by the play in Calcutta in 1917. Anita Desai called it as modest as a dewdrop and as profound as an ocean. The Post Office, in Bengali called the Dak Ghar, is a 1912 play by Rabindranath Tagore. It concerns Amal, a child confined to his adopted uncle's home by an incurable disease. W. Andrew Robinson and Krishna Datta note that the play continues to occupy a special place in Tagore's reputation both within Bengal and in the wider world. It was written in just 4 days. Amal stands in Madhav's courtyard and talks to passerbys and asks in particular about the places they go to. The construction of a new post office nearby prompts the imaginative Amal to fantasize about receiving a letter from the king or being his postman. The village headman mocks Amal and pretends the illiterate child has received a letter from the king promising that his royal physician will come to attend him. The physician really does come with a herald to announce the imminent arrival of the king. Amal, however, falls asleep or maybe he dies because we see Sudha coming to bring him flowers. Tagore, a unique figure in the history of Indian drama in English, equipped himself with the classics of Indian drama and was at the same time alive to the European dramatic tradition. He evolved a dramatic form which influenced the Bengali theatre at the beginning of the century. His career as a dramatist may be divided into 3 periods, namely the pre-GITANJALI period, the GITANJALI period and the post-GITANJALI period. During the pre-GITANJALI period, he wrote Sacrifice, King and Queen, Malini and Balmiki Pratibha. During the GITANJALI period, he wrote Autumn Festival, the classic of conservatism, The King of the Dark Chamber and The Post Office. During the post-GITANJALI period, he wrote The Cycle of Spring, The Free Current Tent and The Red Oleanders. The range and variety of his drama is astonishing. He borrowed many of his themes from Indian mythology, Buddhist legends and other classical sources without any artistic inhibition or compunctions. Edward Thompson remarks, all these dramas are vehicles of thought rather than expressions of action. Tagore achieved a complete dramatic integration in his play The Post Office. We have now examined several important characters, symbols and themes in the play The Post Office by Rabindranath Tagore. Let us look at some autobiographical details of the author and other features of this play. The youngest of 13 surviving children, Tagore was born in the Jorasanko mansion in Calcutta, India, to parents Rabindranath Tagore and Sarada Devi. Tagore family patriarchs were the Brahmo founders of the Adi Dharam faith. The loyalist prince Dwarkanath Tagore, who employed European estate managers and visited with Victoria and other royalty, was his paternal grandfather. Rabindranath had formulated the Brahmoist philosophies espoused by his friend Ram Mohan Roy and became focal in the Brahmo society after Roy's death. Tagore has the rare gift which some poets and writers of fairy stories have of unconsciously using symbols while consciously writing an interesting story. But he appears to be aware of his gift, and for this reason he is not like the writers of other fairy stories, and is indeed halfway between Coleridge and T.S. Eliot. The play embodies the myth of the child as conceived by Indian poets and sages. Amal, in his keen longing for escape from the ephemeral and materialistic world into the world of sensations, and in his wish to seek identity with God, somewhat resembles Dhruva and Prahlada. During this time, India was under British control, and many Indians wanted to free themselves from the British rule. They began to regain attempts at independence. Tagore uses symbolism to express these political views which he shared with his fellow Indians. Tagore wrote the Post Office or Dakghar in 1912, after having lost his son, daughter, wife and father to disease, all within a few years. The chronology of loss prior to Tagore's writing of the Post Office was astounding. His wife died in 1902, his oldest son died in 1903, Satish Chandra Ray, his assistant at the Shanti Niketan, died in 1904. His father died in 1905. His younger son, Samindra, died in 1907. He wrote the Post Office in Bengali in 1911, and he gave a description of how he came to do so. One night, while lying under the stars on the roof of his house in Shanti Niketan and looking at a star-lit sky, he was inspired to write this magnificent play about the death of a child, Amal, which is in fact the boy's liberation and the beginning of a great voyage towards the outside. Through the child's demise, Tagore expresses his conviction that the full meaning of life can only be grasped in death. Yet, he does this with such a light, elegant and poetic touch that the Post Office has found its way into the hearts of audiences everywhere and in many different languages. W.B. Yeats was the first person to produce an English language version of the play. He also wrote a preface to it. Juan Ramon Jimenez translated it into Spanish. It was translated into French by André Gide and read on the radio the night before Paris fell to the Nazis. A Polish version of the play was performed under the supervision of Janusz Korczak in the Warsaw Ghetto. Module 3 Characterization. Tagore keeps his character list short and uses a common language style. The characters, aside from Amal, are each represented and defined by their functions. Amal has an intense curiosity about the outside world and yearns for the type of knowledge that can't be learnt from a book. Sudha gathers flowers, is naive and happy to do work for her parents. Madhav Datta, Amal's guardian, is a man who believes in learning from books and feels comfortable at home rather than outside. The healer is the man who diagnoses Amal's illness and will not let him leave the house because he is sick. The curd seller does exactly that. She sells curds, is a peddler and is not learned but experienced in life. The watchman is a loyal servant to the king. He is knowledgeable of the government and the king's systems. The headman is placed in power by the king but is not so popular with locals. There are a group of boys who encourage Amal to defy the doctor and leave the house. So, these are the main characters in the play. The first scene introduces the doctor and Amal. The doctor symbolizes the British Empire. All the characters throughout the book respect him. Some characters encourage Amal to listen to his decisions. These are the Indians content with the British rule. Others want Amal to rebel. They are the Indians who want to be rid of the British rule. Amal can be seen as a transition Indian. He is obedient to the doctor's orders to stay inside, yet he wants to leave. He knows that he is too young at the moment, but he knows his future lies in leaving. He can be seen as the youth of India. His attitude is characterized by this quote: "See that faraway hill from our window? I often long to go beyond those hills and right away." He stands for the children who are not ready to rise up against the British, but know that someday they will have to. The next scene is a conversation between Amal and Madhav. Madhav represents the older generation of Indians. He is content to stay at home, but also wants to listen to the orders of the doctor. He regrets not being a more learned man and wants Amal to stay home and study. He symbolizes a generation that is too set in their ways and unwilling to stop the British rule. Madhav is content with his life and now directs his attention towards the boy's life. "Formerly, earning was a passion for me," he says. "Now I know it is all for this dear boy. Earning becomes a joy." This characterizes Madhav's willingness to let the younger generation deal with the British rule. Later in the play, Amal meets the dairyman, followed by the watchman, followed by the headman. All three of these characters symbolize different working class levels of the Indian population. The dairyman is the labourer. He is unhappy with his work, but would not dare go against the British rule. He encourages Amal to accept his book learning and not venture out of the house. The watchman represents an Indian that follows the British rule, but does not know why, and more importantly, doesn't care why. He is content with his job and does not question his orders. In one important exchange, Amal talks about the time when Indians should start freeing themselves from the British. The headman is the last working class person presented by Tagore. He is the British controlled Indian. He gains from British control and would be unwilling to be involved in change. The three men symbolize Tagore's views on the current Indian generation. The final set of characters is Sudha and a group of boys. Both are symbols of India's youth. Sudha symbolizes the young and naive group. She thinks that Amal should listen to the doctor, otherwise he would be considered naughty. However, in the end, she is still willing to listen to Amal's ideas about the future. The group of boys is the future of India. They are willing to defy the doctor and encourage Amal to join them. While Amal does not join them, we get the feeling that this group will someday rise up and control India. Symbolism denotes something that stands for something else. For instance, a peacock often symbolizes pride. A rising sun symbolizes birth. A setting sun is associated with death. Shelley and Keats used a lot of symbolism in their poetry. The French and American writers used a lot of symbolism in their writing. English and European literature since World War I has been a notable era for symbolism. Symbolism is of two kinds, traditional and personal. Yeats says, symbolism gives dumb things voices and bodiless things bodies. Tagore is an Indo-Anglian writer who has exuberantly offered symbolism in Chitra and the Post Office. Symbolism is an important aspect of his plays. It has two meanings, apparent and hidden. In the Post Office, Tagore uses different phrases, words, characters symbolically. On the surface, the play is the story of the pain and agony of the human condition. But beneath the natural level, the play symbolizes man's yearning for union with God. The human being, the finite, seeks fulfillment from God, the infinite, and he is elated whenever the union takes place. This is illustrated through exquisite symbols in Tagore's plays. Tagore uses symbols that have been part either of the life of the common people or of the ancient Indian tradition. Only by using them unconsciously could he transform them into the living symbols, not of any particular time, but of the past, the present and the future in one. In this sense, his work may be said to be archetypal. Tagore designed the Post Office to be deceptively simple. The symbolism in the play is central to Tagore's ideology. He was an Indian under British colonial rule. While Britain has lost many of its colonies, it still held on to India. Many Indians wanted to emancipate themselves from British rule and regain their sovereignty, but many others benefited from British rule and were content with the status quo. Throughout the play, Tagore's symbols help explain the current state of India and help produce a strong imagery of the past, the present and the future. Module 6. Various symbols used in the play. The Post Office becomes a symbol of the universe. The king stands for God. The postmen are the 6 seasons representing the visible aspects of nature. The letter is the message of eternity, the message calling us to reach God. The blank slip of paper symbolizes the message of God, which one is free to interpret according to one's own lights. The post office is the place where messages are received and delivered and where there is ample scope for communication. Amal's confinement to the small room symbolizes the human soul impoverished in the mortal body. His soul has received the call of the open road, where there is light and beauty of the world beyond, but it is denied to his soul, the imprisoning confines of the body. The only way to secure freedom of the soul is through death, as death is said to be the emancipation of the spirit. Therefore, the doors and windows of the room are opened on the arrival of the king's physician. The opening of the gate by the king's physician is the opening of the human mind to the nature of experience. Amal finds some comfort in his soul as death brings him spiritual freedom. Tagore himself gave an interpretation of the post office to C.F. Andrews in the following manner. He said, Amal represents the man whose soul has received the call of the open road. He seeks freedom from the comfortable enclosures of habits sanctioned by prudence and from the walls of rigid opinion built for him by the respectable. The king's letter is a suggestive symbol. It comes from a distant, mysterious world, bringing a message from someone whom we hold dear to us. It is an invitation to leave the world of pain and enter the world of eternal bliss. Time is an essential symbol, played by the watchman. We are bound by time, but we can conquer it. It calls for great suffering and pain. Amal's deliverance suggests the note. The symbol of death is also praiseworthy. Death is suffused with a great aura of liberation. It comes always at the moment when the self of a man, seeking no longer for personal gains, is able to say, all my work is mine. We know that Amal is sleeping, but when he wakes, he will find himself in a world of eternal freedom. The play, The Post Office, is divided into two acts. The first act introduces the characters and shows the many changes in the mindset of an ill child. He is asked to stay home with all the windows and doors locked by the physician for the improvement of his health, even though he seems quite healthy both physically and mentally. In the second act, Amal's health becomes worse, mostly physically, but his free spirit remains intact in spite of the physical ailments that he is suffering from. The main essence of the play is the effect of British colonialism on the Indian mindset and the aspirations of the youth at that time. Different characters represent different sections of the society of that era. The king represents the royal British Empire. Madhav, the guardian of the young boy Amal, represents the older generation. Amal symbolizes the youth, eager to break free of traditional routine life, a central clearing house from which our words, thoughts, and sentiments emanate out across the world. Not only that, but even when we are gone, our spirit will remain surrounding us in the air. Tagore uses the notion of freedom to decry narrow nationalistic boundaries governed by the myopic ambition of politicians and greed. Even though Amal is physically bound, he isn't a prisoner in the spiritual or creative sense. His flourishing imagination, coupled with his disarming affability, connects him to the hearts of those people around him. Amal can be seen as a transition Indian. He is obedient enough to the doctor, yet he wants to leave. He knows he is too young at the moment, but he knows his future lies in leaving. He can be seen as the youth of India. His attitude is characterized by this quote: "See that far away hill from our window. I often long to go beyond those hills and right away." He shows that children that are not ready to rise up against the British, but someday they will have to. Though Amal is forbidden by the village doctor to move outdoors and lies confined to his room, he makes his life happy by collecting a host of friends who are ready to minister to his inquisitive, innocent mind in the most delightful ways possible. He not only feels happy, but also makes those who come in contact with him very happy. He is happy in the fertile world of his imagination and is willing, when the time comes, to journey from this world to the next. With this, we come to the end of our discussion of the play The Post Office by Rabindranath Tagore. In this discussion, we have examined autobiographical details of Tagore's life, important characters, themes and symbols in the play. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of this play. Thank you.